We open episode 4 on those same rows of houses in the sand that we've seen before. However, this line of houses in the sand seems to have something similar to the Hollywood Walk of Fame. However, that can't be correct, as the previous episode had a road sign pointing to Hollywood Boulevard, which is where it is located across the Gulper Lake, which Lucy and Ghoul Howard turned away from. So did they walk around the lake towards the tree line on the other side, which happened to have desert on it? Or does space-time not work in this world? We'll never know, I guess. Anyway, Ghoul Howard is coughing again, telling us that he needs another dose of those drugs that were unfortunately smashed last episode, because he was not taking care of them. The line of houses in the sand changes from what was previously shown, and now includes housing, rows and a medical centre. This reinforces the notion that space-time does not function correctly here. Still, a sign tells us that it is the West Side Medical Clinic, which again puts the pair in a completely different area to where they've previously shown, as there are no West Side medical services on or around Hollywood Boulevard. So once again, I have no idea where they have warped off to. Hearing someone making noises from inside, Ghoul Howard leads Lucy off inside, where they come across another ghoul. This one's voice seems to overlap with itself when growling, but then is perfectly normal again when speaking. His name is either Raj or Raj, it's difficult to make out, but he recognises Ghoul Howard and asks if he is after the bounty too. Due to the lack of backstory for this character, it could be that he was out for the bounty on Wilzig, but given his state, clothing and lack of weapons, I do not believe he was out hunting, which would lead to the conclusion that he met other people who were after the bounty, and Ghoul Howard just happens to be the latest one he's met. However, there is no evidence supporting this notion either. We can see that he has been at his medical centre for some time, as there are 4 vials of what appear to be similar drugs to what Ghoul Howard has been taking on the sand. Now, using a little bit of foreknowledge here, this tells us he's been sitting in this location for at least 4 days, as those drugs are required to be taken once per day. This would also disprove the theory that he's been out hunting for the bounty, unless he was exceptionally bad at bounty hunting and just waited around the medical centre for the bounty to come to him. Still, they have a short conversation where he says that smoothies can be rather unkind, then sees Lucy and notes that Ghoul Howard has a smoothie of his own, informing us, the viewer, that smoothie is the name ghouls use for humans. Ghoul Howard confirms that he is turning, and he asks for some vials, which Ghoul Howard says no, confirming that what we saw earlier on the floor are indeed the same drugs that Howard was taking. Raj nods knowingly and suggests leaving before things get ugly, before stating that it has been 28 years since he started showing, but Ghoul Howard has been going for much longer than that. The show does not say if he is referring to the creeping insanity or turning into a ghoul with regards to that. Hearing through the accent for a moment here, I believe the ghoul's name is actually Roger, not Raj. Ghoul Howard starts to reminisce with Roger, asking if he remembers how good food used to taste, which Roger recalls the taste of Blamco mac and cheese, which means he must be pre-war, as packaged food would be the first thing to go after global devastation, with any survivors gathering and eating what they can while learning how to plant crops. As such, the previously mentioned 28 years must refer to the mental degradation he now has. With Roger suitably distracted, Ghoul Howard shoots him in the head. Lucy, clearly flabbergasted as to what happened, asked why Ghoul Howard did that, while he pulls teeth and flips over dead Roger, before asking her what her name was. She says Lucy McLean, with the surname seeming familiar to him. Still, he goes back to butchering the corpse, saying that sometimes you have to resort to cannibalism, which is once again very odd, as he himself would be regularly buried for up to a year by Dom Pedro, during which time he would not eat nor drink, thus does not need to eat a fella, as he puts it. But he does anyway. Raw. Lucy says that there was a great plague in Vault 33 in 2277. The people starved because they could not farm, including her mother. Now, her father still did not resort to cannibalism. Ghoul Howard chuckles at this, saying that people lie, and Hank was probably first in line to get that sweet, sweet human meat. Lucy asks why Ghoul Howard keeps going like this, to which he retorts with asking why he's doing all the work, and gets Lucy to butcher the remains of Roger. Back we go to Vault 33 and the election of a new overseer. Norman's seemingly correct that the council wanted to keep the power they had come to. Still, Woody and Reg are standing by one of the new cells with a bound raider in it. Curiously, the raider appears to have a sleeveless leather jacket on, which he would not have come in with, as the raiding party were all wearing vault suits in episode 1. But regardless, Woody says he has not been able to get any information out of him. The raider starts struggling in his bindings, and a decision is reached to tranquilise him for his own safety. Norman is sat looking at a picture of his father on his Pip-Boy screen when Betty comes up from a nearby room and hands him some pie. He notes that she is there to talk about his comments at the meeting from the last episode. He posits it's because it upset people, and people don't like getting upset. Betty says, but you do, which is a very odd thing to say. She seems to be suggesting that Norman likes being upset or potentially upsetting other people, but I do not recall anything else that would support either of these notions. Perhaps she means that he wants to feel upset and not return to normality given the events that have transpired, but who knows at this point. She goes on to say that as the last McLean in the vault, his name carries weight, but does not elaborate further. Next comes a very odd thing to say, as Betty tells Norman that normal people get angry and pee on the wall, but when clever boys get angry, it is good to not see where that can lead. I'm not sure about this line, but I think she's trying to say that most boys will just be reactionary to what angered them. Smart boys sit and plan how to react before doing so. If I am correct about this, then it's quite an odd way to put it, in my opinion. Anyway, back outside to Lucy and Ghoul Howard, and Howard is coughing again, the effects not having his drugs seemingly to be catching up with him. They do, however, make sure to show us that he has got Roger's flesh strapped to his bag. Lucy, looking decidedly worse for wear, stops near some dirty rainwater, which her Geiger counter helpfully sparks into life at this exact moment to tell us it's radioactive. Ghoul Howard fills his canteen from it and, like a complete arsehole, drinks it while staring at her, taunting her to take a drink herself, which she does, cracking under the pressure. He snidely comments about the golden rule and does the whole "we're not so different" thing, saying that she will turn into him in time. He starts to cough again, and Lucy takes this as a chance to bolt. Given the scenery, I once again have no idea where they are or how long it has taken them to get there, as there is no sign behind them of the medical centre they were just at. Still, I suppose they could have turned a corner at some point. It's not exactly clear either way. Lucy comes to a halt at a giant crater surrounded by the skeletons of burned out buildings. This gives Ghoul Howard a chance to use those rope tricks shown off in episode 1 to lasso her, and we helpfully see a sign that says Santa Monica Boulevard was back in the direction they came from, which tells us that they have been walking, minus the pit stop to eat Roger, for around 3 to 3.5 hours from the start of the episode. Still, Lucy takes this opportunity to bite off one of Ghoul Howard's fingers, which, being the git that he is, returns the favour in a mockery of the golden rule. Anyway, back to 33. Chet is settling down to a meal alone for possibly the first time in his life, when there is a knock at the door. Oddly, it is Stephanie who has dropped by to check up on him. They both appear to start bonding over shared trauma before she offers Chet some of Bert's belongings, which he accepts. Both act awkwardly as she slowly takes Bert's belongings out and puts them on Chet before calling him Bert. But as she tries to work through her trauma. This is immediately undercut for a comedic moment as she starts to make out with him before her water breaks. Haha, so funny. With that interlude over, we are back outside again as Ghoul leads Lucy up to a super duper mart. He asks for 2 months worth of the anti-feral vials in exchange for Lucy, saying she is in mint condition, before pausing and then saying near mint. Again, this is a little joke that whoever is on the other end of the intercom would seem to be in on, as they wait for him to correct himself before stating they will need to examine Lucy to assess her actual condition. She asks what's inside, to which he is needlessly cryptic. Still, he forces her to go inside at gunpoint, and very conveniently collapses once she's out of sight. Inside looks to be semi-restored. As she moves forward with trepidation, a robot hovers into view, startling her. Now, unlike other beings in this universe, this robot did not teleport suddenly into the scene, as there was a corner from which it emerged. Still, it is a little odd that she did not hear it approach and says, "What the fudge?" This is funny, because she almost swore. The robot misunderstands and says they have no fudge, only itself, which is a General Atomics International Mark IV. Lucy takes this as an opportunity to try and elicit help from the robot, but when she goes to point back to the door, it simply states that she's lost a finger and invites her to follow in order to fix that issue. The robot claims to have no sense of time and directs Lucy to sit on a nearby gurney before rummaging through a drawer full of severed fingers that it has for some reason. Perhaps it is also a joke, or simply means to an end for them not to have to keep the actress's finger wrapped in green screen material, who can say. Still, it picks out a finger that looks to have been dead for quite some time and solders it back onto her hand, where it just starts working again, seemingly without setting the bone, connecting up any of the blood vessels, or knitting the muscle together. The robot offers a variety of dressings, setting it even more at ease, and as such she starts relaxing and relating the events that have led up to the scene, and says that she thought she was going to be a sex slave. The robot, completely flabbergasted by this, exclaims that that's complete rubbish, they're just going to harvest her organs, before hitting her with a tranquilizer. One quick question, if I may. If the plan was to always harvest her organs, why attach a new finger and offer wound dressings? Fingers are not organs, and taking one out of a drawer to stick on a hand, she is supposed to be very dead very shortly, is not exactly a logical course of action. There was no reason to attach that finger, and once Lucy was on the gurney, she should have just been sedated right away. Now, we know that it is a medical robot, given the symbol printed on its casing, but its ethical programming would not have made it do that, as it clearly has none if it's going to harvest her organs anyway. Regardless, we jump back to Vault 33 again, this time with Norman and his food tray for the prisoners. The guard is surprised that the prisoners are getting jello cake and questions what Hank would say about it. Norman says Hank would be handing it out himself, with the guard saying that he was indeed quite the saint. Norman lets the guard have the rest of the cake, and she rushes off to put it in her fridge, presumably not stopped by the other guard by the door, but they are off screen, so I guess they don't exist. One of the raiders squares up to Norman, trying to intimidate him, but he stares right back, telling them that they are paying a price for what they did to 32 and 33. The raider says he has no idea what the people of 32 were up to, but it was certainly not anything innocent. With the line delivered, Cryptic Raider Man goes back and vanishes from the show. Sometime later, Norman is at a computer terminal and looking at logs of transactions between 33 and 31, one of which is technical expertise, which means that someone from Vault 33 has been into Vault 31. The next screen gives the date of February 24th, 2095, and that assistance from Vault 31 was requested to aid with repairs. There's also a note that the security protocols were overridden, calling back to mentions in previous episodes about Norman being good with computers. He attempts to access Vault 32 records, but is denied. This makes him concerned enough to go to Chet, and we get to see Stephanie going into labour as he stands at the door. I guess this is funny, I don't know. Either way, Chet is very easily convinced to leave, and the pair go to the intra-vault door. They start clearing the rubble and venture inside. Like last time, we emerge on the dead wheat fields, with Chet shocked at what he's seeing. Norman confirms that it must have been this way for a long time. It is here. I must make a correction to my first video. I thought they said tri-annual trade, meaning 3 times per year. When listening very carefully again, it sounds like tri-ennial, meaning every 3 years. However, that does bring up the new issue, which is the date on the wedding dress on episode 1, saying Stephanie Harper wore it in 2294, the current year being 2296, a gap of only 2 years. It is not made clear anywhere that I can find if the 3-year trading cycle is between each vault separately, meaning 1 year trade with 31, 1 year with 32, and 1 without trading, or if all trades take place within the same year. Regardless, everyone was still long dead when the raiders got there, and as such, we continue with the story. Both Chet and Norman go off to explore administration, finding that the residents of 32 had all killed themselves. Of note is that the blood appears quite fresh and shiny, whereas anyone who has used a tissue to stop a wound will know blood dries fairly quickly and goes brown. Norman confirms that these people have been dead for 2 years. As they explore, they come across another corpse in front of a television which has been on, presumably, continually for 2 years, and showing a study of a rat maze, saying that the overcrowded rats will compete for space by killing each other. I think we are supposed to take from this that this is what happened in Vault 32. However, one corpse has helpfully scrawled on the wall, "We know the truth in blood," which raises doubts over the rat theory of them ending each other to survive, as if they know the truth, and that truth is that they have been overpopulated, Vault 32 has a door to the outside, and they could have just left. Side note, Truth's skeleton looks to be naked, meaning that it could have been one of the bodies that the raiders stripped for vault suits before positioning it back where they found it. It also means that all these corpses were left perfectly positioned where they fell by the raiders for days, if not longer. While the initial trade between 32 and 33 was arranged, because these only take place every 3 years, and the bodies have been dead for 2 years, it could have been anywhere up to that 2-year time frame in which the raiders turned up and presumably stayed in the vault with all those corpses. Anyway, back to the super duper mart. The robot is wheeling Lucy off to a different room than before, and the sedation starts to wear off as they pass some illuminated cages. She is getting flashbacks to her mother before realising what she's being wheeled past: caged ghouls. It is difficult to make out exactly what's going on, but it looks like there are names and prices on each cage. Could they be for sale? Are those debt numbers? Who knows? Robot rolls up to 2 men sitting on a couch and watching TV. They appear to be quite high on something and call the robot Snip Snip, deciding that Lucy is worth 60 vials of Ghoul Howard's anti-feral drugs. This is confirmation that they have to be taken every day, as he asked for 2 months. This also confirms that Roger had probably run out the day before Ghoul Howard stumbled across him. Anyway, they tell Snip Snip to process Lucy right away, so they're ready for the next pickup. The drugs having worn off already, Lucy begs for Snip Snip to not harvest her organs. Being a robot, Snip Snip does not care, and goes to cut her open with the buzzsaw anyway. Taking its time getting started gives Lucy the chance to kick the saw blade to one side and free herself. Snip Snip seems quite slow in its actions, right up until Lucy snatches up a defibrillator and electrocutes Snip Snip. This does not destroy it, being a robot, but does cause probably irreparable damage and renders it practically immobile. Going back to the two high guys, Lucy threatens Snip Snip, which they shrug at and say it's just a robot. Given how nonplussed they are, she moves up a notch and states that she put a Braxo cleaner in the syringes. This causes them to agree that, okay, she can leave, but she demands that the ghouls get let out too. They agree and flip a switch, letting them all out, little realising that each one of them has about a day at most before they go feral and start attacking random people they find out in the wastes. The feral ones are not released, and Lucy once again demands their cages open. The guys try to tell her it's not a good idea, but she insists, so they comply. 3 emerge, and it's at this point Lucy realises exactly what it is she's done. A struggle ensues, with a fried Snip Snip being the comic relief of the scene, and both the high guys and the ghouls end each other, which is quite convenient indeed for Lucy. However, there is still one left, Martha. She is trying to hold it together, but is showing some symptoms as Roger. Lucy tries to reason with Martha, but it's no use, and Martha attacks. Lucy grabs a pistol lying at her feet, uses it to end Martha. Given the way the scene is shot, we cannot see where Martha is hit, as all we get is her leaping, the shot, then Martha falling. However, of the previous 3 ghouls, only one was taken out by a headshot, the others by what appear to be upper torso or collar hits. This raises the question of why, back in Philly, Ghoul Howard was able to take multiple torso hits and shrug them off as if nothing at all. Do ghouls need to be shot in the head, or do they not? Are they zombies, or just humans with rotten appearances? The show, it seems, is not going to say. Anyway, enough of that, because back to the vaults again, with Chet and Norman in 32. The pair walk into a room where several of the dwellers have all hung themselves, presumably at the same time, passing through into the Overseer's office, with the Overseer himself tied up to his chair. Method of death unknown, but there are a suspicious amount of bottles of glue around him. Chet quite rightly points out that it looks like everyone went insane, but not satisfied yet, Norman wants to find out exactly how the raiders got in. While he goes to check the terminal, we get Chet shining a light on "Death to Management" written on the wall. Who wrote this? We do not know. Why was it written? Again, we do not know. If everyone in 32 were going to off themselves, and it was going to be another 2 years before anyone would even consider investigating, why did that get written on the wall? The only reason can possibly be for the viewing audience. Checking the logs, Norman says that the door was opened from the outside, which makes sense, as why would they open the door to the outside, wait for the raiders to turn up, and then off themselves? Anyway, it is stated that they needed a Pip-Boy to open the door, which Norman confirms they had, and it belonged to Rose McLean, his mother. The mystery deepens. How could the raiders have gotten her Pip-Boy if, as Lucy said, she died during the plague of 77, when everyone was quarantined and she starved to death? Someone is telling porkies. Well, with that out of the way, we are back to Lucy again, sporting 2 boots now, as well as leather armour pads, as she exits the Super Duper Mart. Finding Ghoul Howard still on the floor, she gives him the vials he needs and confirms that if ghouls do not take the drugs, they go feral. This is confirmation that she's still trying to be a good person deep down. She has unfortunately already forgotten that she just released several ghouls who did not have access to any of these drugs, and will be a threat to anyone who crosses their path after 24 hours. Also, said ghouls must have fled past Ghoul Howard, and that one of them seemingly deciding to stop and loot the helpless cowpoke. It is as if they left the scene in the market and then stopped existing before getting outside. Anyway, referencing the golden rule one last time, she leaves and triumphant music swells. Ghoul Howard, for his part, goes into the Super Duper Mart and starts stuffing his face with whatever booze and drugs he can find, including the stash of antiferal meds the high guys kept on the sofa. Turning to leave, he spots the TV, which we last saw was on during the previous scenes, but is now off. Lucy could have turned it off, but given how she did not seemingly try to clean anything else up, it's unlikely, and it probably just switched itself off somehow. Slipping in an old tape of one of his old films, he settles down on the sofa and gets to watch the man he used to be playing the man he would eventually become. And cut to credits. Another decidedly less than average episode in my opinion. Ghoul, Howard and Lucy either teleport everywhere or walk for hours straight with the goal of reaching the super duper mark. He continues to show himself as a self-centered arse, with only the scene at the end showing him to be seemingly remembering who he used to be and what morals he used to hold on to. I guess after 200 years of having to scrape and survive have changed him into the man we now have on screen. Lucy shows some growth here, slowly realising that the wasteland is nothing like the vaults and starting to adapt to survive. However, there is the issue raised in previous episodes but brought to the fore with this one, and that's the antiferal meds. While I do not expect every little thing to be explained, we have here medication for anyone who has become a ghoul, which allows them to keep their minds and not attack random people like wild animals. As these are required to be taken every day, it does ask a question that is not answered. How long have these been made? Are they a pre-war drug that panicked ghouls took at random, found it helped and then started to mass produce? Is this a super duper mart only place where they are being made? Do ghouls only have to start taking the drugs after a number of years? Roger did mention the 28 and that he had a good run. Also, was the organ harvesting anything to do with them or something completely unrelated? Again, don't know. Finally, with the production in that area now having stopped, does this mean that every single ghoul not only has what supplies they have on them before there is a mass feral outbreak? These questions are not answered here, nor will they probably be answered in the upcoming Season 2. In my opinion, the vault scenes are the highlight of the episode. Bar the jokes at Stephanie and Chef's expense, they have built upon the initial mystery of dead residents of 32 that we got to glimpse in episode 1. What is it that they say they knew? Why do they want to kill management? And why did Lee Moldava have Rose McClane's Pip-Boy when she supposedly died in Vault 33 of starvation? Please stick around for my breakdown of episode 5, with a bit of luck coming out a little bit quicker than his last few, if Amazon decide to stop copywriting them. Ta-ta!